Now, our beloved President Ronald Reagan passed away almost 10 years ago. But as many in this audience know, it seems nearly impossible to follow political news without hearing some reference to our 40th president. His memory, his name, and fortunately, his legacy seem to be ubiquitous as our country grapples with the challenges of our time. For many years, probably starting with the day after President Reagan left office in 1989, there's been a famous question often asked when there's a particularly vexing problem facing our country. You've likely heard it before. We, the questioners, often ask, well, what would Reagan do? It's a good question to ask because while times and technology and many faces have changed since President Reagan was in office, some important fundamentals, those that speak to who we are as Americans, have not. I believe that our guest today, Governor Jeb Bush, understands this. And it's one of the reasons that after having left office just about 6 years ago, he remains an extremely important national voice in the Republican Party. As we prepare to welcome the governor to the stage, let's first take stock in a handful of issues that we know were of vital importance to Ronald Reagan and square them up against the words and deeds of Jeb Bush on those same critical topics today. So what are the fundamental issues? Well, let's begin with taxes. We know Ronald Reagan spent much of his life trying to cut them for the average American. He was convinced that it was the man or woman on the street who knew how to spend their dollar more wisely than a distant federal government. And he did all in his power to prove it by cutting taxes. When Governor Jeb Bush was in office, he cut taxes on Floridians by $20 billion. Let's talk about the size of government. When Ronald Reagan was in the White House, he dramatically reduced the rate of growth in federal spending and strove to reduce the size of the federal government. When Governor Bush was in office, he vetoed more than $2.3 billion in earmarks for higher state spending and reduced the size of the state's government payroll by 13,000 people. When Ronald Reagan cut taxes and reduced the size of the government on the national level, he did it with a purpose in mind. It was to spur the free market, create opportunity, and provide incentives for businesses to grow. In his years in office, over 20 million new jobs were created. In Governor Bush's state of Florida, his similar philosophy and economic programs created a thriving state economy where 1.4 million new net jobs were added during his time in office. There are other fundamentally important issues where the two men match. Stemming the rising cost of health care, improving education through accountability and school choice, and as I'm sure we'll hear some more this morning, addressing the vital issues involving immigration that affect all of us. These are all issues addressed by Ronald Reagan years ago that continue to resonate as important topics in our lives, ones in which Governor Bush has demonstrated much needed leadership today. It is for these and many other reasons that Jeb Bush stands as the only Republican governor in the history of the state of Florida to be reelected to office. He hails from a family that has gone out of their way to extend warmth and support to Mrs. Reagan and all of us at the Reagan Library over the years. Let us extend that warmth to him. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Governor Jeb Bush.
Thank you. Very kind.
Thank you.
I'm really honored to be here. Woo. Thank you. Thank you all so much, Ambassador. Great seeing you. Thank you so much. It is an incredible honor to be in this beautiful place. I'm just in awe of what you all have done here, and truly privileged and honored to be here. I thought I would start my remarks by giving you a quick Bush family update. First, I want to thank everybody for their thoughts and prayers for my dad. As he said, put the harps back in the closet. It wasn't time to go. He's always had a pretty good sense of humor, and thank goodness he was right about that. And the harps are back in the closet. That's the good news. He's out of the hospital and regaining his strength little by little. Yesterday he was at his library, in fact, with Prime Minister Mulroney, and he's been there at Texas A&M now twice in the last 2 weeks, which is a good sign that he is regaining his strength. That's the good news. The bad news... The bad news is he's not going to be pampered anymore like he was in the hospital. He has a new caregiver. Her name is Barbara Bush, and she's pretty tough. So I'm always asked about my brother. You haven't seen much about him in the last several months. He's been kind of out of the limelight for a while. So since you asked, Marvin is doing really well. Thanks for asking. Seriously, my brother George and Laura have laid low in the last 4 years. They've maintained, I think, a tradition that is something pretty noble in our country, which is when you leave the stage, you leave the stage. You stop chirping about what's going on, even if the guy that precedes you, now I can say this as a brother, excuse me, even if he uses you as a prop to lower the expectations to make everything look better during your time, my brother, I think, has maintained this tradition that President Reagan did, certainly, and my dad did after him, and that's to leave the stage. They had a chance to serve. It was the greatest joy in my brother's life, and I'm proud of him for showing the self-restraint that I could never have. Two other quick family updates. My son, George P., is proving that it's either genetics or social upbringing, but something compels a Bush to run for office generation after generation. He's running for statewide office in Texas, and I'm really proud of him. Now I know what it's like. Just thinking about it, I get emotional. When my dad was asked about what it was like for his sons to run for office and how he could almost barely complete a sentence. I'm in that same stage now of life, and so he may be crazy for running, but I'm proud of him for doing it, and he's a great guy. And then the last thing I got to tell you about in the Bush family is something that I wasn't a grandfather for way too long, and all the grandfathers and grandmothers of the world would always share their pictures. Have you had that experience? Now I'm the worst culprit. I was thinking about pulling out my phone to show you Georgia Helena Walker Bush. You think about her name, this could be a place that would get that right away. I speak in some places and I mention her name and her initials. Not everybody gets it, but here, of course, you would. She is the love of our life. And a couple of things about Georgia. If there are any grandparents in the room, I find it amazing that we brought up our children. Whether it was through trial and error, it wasn't always perfect, right? We brought up our children. It's a little bit of a training program to take care of grandchildren, you would think. But once you get grandchildren, your children make you go through another training process to be able to babysit. So we've got to do it twice now. She's 18 months old. My hope is that we can start doing this on a more regular basis. And when I'm alone with her, her nickname is 41. So... One final thing about Georgia that I think relates to some of the subject matter I'm going to talk about today. She would be what you would call, I guess, in the politically correct world of American politics, she would be a quadra-hyphenated American. So she is a Iraqi, Canadian, Texan, Mexican, American. So she's got a lot of diversity, which is really kind of the forward-leaning nature of our country in many ways. And 20 years from now, when she pulls out the form that she will have to fill out like all of us, the census form, she'll say not applicable. And that's the way it should be, I think, in our country, where we take away identity politics and focus on the shared values that we have, irrespective of where we come from. My little precious Georgia may be a leading indicator of things to come in our country, and I hope that's right. As I said, it is an incredible honor to be with you all today. My first experience with Ronald Reagan was in Bismarck, North Dakota, believe it or not. And it was at the State Party Convention in 1980. It was in the late spring. Andrew, you may have been there doing advance work. And I was the surrogate for the guy who was kind of in second place in that process. And I walk into this place, there are 4,000 people. in Bismarck, North Dakota in 1980. I'm telling you, this was like